A few hours later, Lu Sheng and Harold went to the conference room of the base. Our boy was sitting and browsing his mobile phone, while on the other side, Harold was standing next to him. Lu Sheng made a video call with his sister King. She started showing 2 fingers, closed her eyes and with a kind smile mentioned that she hoped to see him again soon, promising that he was going to be greatly surprised since she had almost finished muscle and bone training and would soon ascend to level 4. Lu Sheng began observing his sister, and his eyes widened with joy. With a proud smile, he said that he knew how incredible his little sister was. He asked her to give the phone to their parents since he wanted to talk to them. King nodded and handed the mobile phone to her father. Upon seeing Lu Sheng, the mother's eyes filled with tears and happiness. With a worried smile, she admitted that she was somewhat concerned about him. She was happy to see that he was doing well and asked him to finish his mission quickly and returned to them since everyone missed him. The father, who was behind her, closed his eyes and began to show a smile. Lu Sheng remained silent, watching his parents. His eyes started to shine. With a smile, he promised to return as soon as possible, asking them to take care of themselves. After talking with them, Lu Sheng ended the video call and remained looking at the phone screen in silence. The eyes of Marshal Saint Harold, who was standing beside him, widened in confusion. His attention was fixed on Lu Sheng's mobile phone, and he began to sweat without knowing what was happening. He started staring at Lu Sheng, and with a curious gaze, he realized that the supposed god had parents who were no more than 50 years old, and his younger sister was not yet of age. He did not know how old this god really was. With a smile, Lu Sheng continued browsing his mobile phone. The jaw of poor Marshal Saint Harold dropped, and his eyes expanded in fear. He simply could not believe it. Lu Sheng was precisely a young man whose age did not even reach that of his great-great-grandson. Just a few hours ago, our boy had instantly and effortlessly killed 2 level 9 Marshal Saints, directly eliminating the leaders of 2 major mysterious organizations in the world. His eyes widened in surprise, and he couldn't help but sweat profusely. He knew that if he spread this news, no one would believe him. He used to mock the new rumors about the Marshal Saint of the Dragon Kingdom, realizing that Lu Sheng was the new Marshal Saint. He began to imagine Lu Sheng with his hands in his pants pockets, smiling and surrounded by an intense martial energy. He had killed 3 Marshal Saints. A question came to Harold's mind. He didn't know how many more level 9 warriors existed in this world. For him, this was terrifying. While Harold was lost in his thoughts, Lu Sheng was on a video call with his friends. With a cheerful expression, he started pointing at Harold with his finger and decided to say goodbye to them since there were still people waiting for him to discuss matters. Upon hearing this, Harold came out of his trance, and his eyes filled with surprise and confusion. He could not believe that someone as strong as Lu Sheng really existed in this world. Lu Sheng put the mobile phone in front of Harold and focused on his face. He closed his eyes and, with a nervous smile, began to wave at Lu Sheng's friends. Lu Sheng turned off the mobile phone and placed it on the table. Then he turned to Harold, and his eyes filled with gratitude. He began to observe Harold and, with a smile, thanked him for his cooperation. Harold lowered his head before him and mentioned that it was an honor for him to serve Lu Sheng. Our boy took out the sample of energy crystal that he had in his pocket, began to observe it with a curious expression. He decided that it was time to talk about their matter. He asked if Harold knew what this thing was. The energy crystal began to shine intensely. Harold's attention fixed on it and his eyes widened in surprise. He began to sweat and ponder in silence. He placed his hand over his chest, closed his eyes again, lowered his head before him, and with a sincere expression asked how many energy crystals Lu Sheng needed. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng turned to him and with a curious gaze asked how many energy crystals Harold could obtain. Harold's eyes began to shine with seriousness and in a sincere tone. He hesitated for a second until he revealed that he could obtain 1 kilogram of energy crystals. Upon hearing this, an excited smile spread across Lu Sheng's face and his eyes began to shine with joy. Originally, he had only asked out of pure curiosity and did not expect Harold to think he was extorting him. He was happy because he had managed to obtain many resources from Harold and his organization. Lu Sheng's body began to emit orange martial energy. his attention fixed on her, old, and he couldn't help but smile. A few grams of energy crystals could make his immortal cells progress by leaps and bounds. With a kilogram, he feared it would be more than enough to reach the true limit of his level 8 stellar body. While Harold had his head lowered, Lu Sheng placed his hand under his chin and began to ponder. A question came to his mind. He didn't know if he looked like someone so terrifying that Harold thought he was a villain. Lu Sheng snapped out of his trance, turned to Harold, and with a cheerful smile mentioned that it seemed like he had many energy crystals. Harold raised his head and his eyes widened in surprise and his jaw dropped, revealing that he actually did not have many energy crystals. In these 100 years, he had only accumulated a few hundred grams. But since Lu Sheng had killed the leaders of Dark Star and the Black Magic Society, if he took over their territories, he would be able to gather a kilogram of energy crystals. With a curious expression, Lu Sheng asked if the production of energy crystals was really so scarce. Harold's expression changed and his eyes filled with seriousness. He extended his hand and explained that although finding energy crystal deposits was rare, there was no shortage. He began to imagine a man with 3 eyes, with a gaze full of fear. Harold mentioned that every time energy crystals were produced, the 9% had to be given to the guides. And only 10% of what was produced was distributed among all the martial saints of the world. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng became curious. He started staring at Harold and asked who the guides were. His eyes widened in fear and seriousness. He began to sweat, not knowing if the guides were the deity that had appeared in his battle against Zhao Ji. Harold extended his hands, approached Lu Sheng, and with a sincere expression mentioned that it seemed Lu Sheng should not know this, and also that the guides had probably not yet had time to contact Lu Sheng. Our boy began to observe Harold and listen attentively in silence. Harold started to imagine a group of men wearing masks, and revealed that the job of the guides was to register the number of level 9 martial saints and, along the way, collect energy crystals. He had discovered this secret in his 7th year as a martial saint. With a calm gaze, Lu Sheng interrupted him by giving him the order to get to the point. Harold extended his hand and began to imagine a powerful hooded deity. His eyes started to shine seriously as he explained that the guides were powerful martial artists from planets with advanced civilizations, possessing power far greater than that of a level 9 warrior. No one knew if they were level 10 or even higher. They had appeared since year 1 of the martial path, leading the rise of martial arts. When in the Blue Star 9 level martial saints emerged, the guides descended to establish a new world order, organizing the warriors of each nation and collecting energy crystals together. The guides never intervened in conflicts between nations, except when too many 9 level martial saints fell. And only then would they descend to impose punishments. Lu Sheng remained calm and with a curious gaze asked if the guides were going to intervene if 3 martial saints died. Harold's eyes began to shine. He started staring at Lu Sheng and replied no, since the last time the guides intervened was in the battle between the Dragon Kingdom and Lion, with more than 10 martial saints dead and injured. In fact, the supervision of the guides over them was quite lax. They only cared about 3 things. The first was the issue of energy crystal production. If production decreased, the guides would get angry, and in severe cases the martial saints had to pay out of their own pockets to meet the quota. The second was the invasion of exotic beasts. They had to suppress beast invasions below a safe threshold. If disturbances greater than expected occurred, the martial saints were obligated to intervene to repel the beasts. Harold's eyes widened in fear, making him sweat. He approached Lu Sheng and revealed that without the permission of the guides, the appearance of a martial arts expert of level 9 or higher was not allowed on the day. Assumed that this was established to facilitate resource collection for the guides, revealing that their planet was called a first-level resource star. Lu Sheng crossed his arms and began to gaze at the ground in silence. His eyes started to shine with hatred as this coincided with what he had seen in the dream space. He began to imagine a powerful deity controlling the world. Without level 10 martial artists, the limit of local martial power was maintained. An advanced civilization led the martial development of the indigenous, facing invasions from exotic beasts while collecting rare and valuable resources from the planet, all while restricting the birth of strong warriors. The gaze of our boy fixed on Harold. With a serious expression, he asked what they should do when a warrior capable of surpassing level 9 was born. Harold froze, thinking in silence, and his eyes widened in surprise. With an uncertain expression, he said that he did not know. With a serious expression, he explained that the path to ascend beyond level 9 was in the hands of the guides. Without help, there was no way to break that limit. Lu Sheng put his hand under his chin, closed his eyes, and began to think in silence. Then his eyes started to shine with determination, and he asked when the guides were coming next time. With an uncertain expression, Harold looked away and explained that the guides were going to arrive in a few months, but he was not sure about the details. Each time they were received by a representative of the martial saints from the World Martial Arts Association. But it was certain that they always came after the collection of energy crystals at the World Masters Congress. Lu Sheng started to gaze at the ground with a confused expression and asked if the World Masters Conference had been created for the purpose of collecting energy crystals and distributing quotas. Harold began to look down at the ground in silence. With a sincere gaze, he replied yes, explaining that any warrior who had the level of martial saint could attend. Dark Star and Black Magic Society only wanted more shares, and for this reason, they had joined forces to attack Harold, since after all, if there was one less person sharing the cake, the others could eat a little more. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with tranquility. He turned to Harold and asked if many martial saints attended. With a serene gaze, Harold began to imagine the powerful martial saints and revealed that it could be said that all the martial saints who could attend would be present. Lu Sheng rested his hand on the table and stood up with an excited smile. He asked if he could accompany Harold when the time came. Harold began to observe Lu Sheng in silence until he placed his hand on his chest and his eyes widened with joy. With a smile, he mentioned that it would be an honor for him. He couldn't believe that someone as powerful as Lu Sheng wanted to attend and support his association, realizing that this time the distribution quota for his association was going to be higher than ever. Lu Sheng turned toward him and, with a smile, decided not to take Harold's. He only asked to be given Dark Stars and Black Magic Society's share. He also asked him to take good care of Nepson for him and not shatter his sweet illusions, since Lu Sheng still had a few more wishes left to grant him. Harold joined his hands in joy and with a smile accepted. Lu Sheng turned his back and slowly began to walk away, deciding that it was time to leave. Harold panicked, reached out to him, and with a curious gaze, asked what his current strength. Lu Sheng kept walking until he stopped, turned his head, and while his eyes were shining, he smiled and replied that he was a level 8 warrior. Harold closed his eyes and sighed, as he thought Lu Sheng was a level 10 warrior. But then, his jaw dropped and he transformed into Usopp from One Piece upon seeing that Lu Sheng was a level 8 warrior. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, please subscribe our channel and like and share the video. Welcome to our channel.